quiet zone, if we were able to put quad gates up, we will more than likely be eligible for quiet zone from Encinal to Fifth Avenue, so that the whistles would not blow while going through Atherton. And so those would be the two reasons for it, and we discussed it at length and unanimously voted to bring it before you today. And I'll read this letter from Scott Lane. My family and I live near Watkins Avenue Rail Crossing. As nearby residents, we've seen increases in traffic at this crossing that have us concerned about safety of drivers, residents, and families in the area. I'm writing you to requesting that the council consider adding quad gates to this rail crossing. There are several compelling reasons for adding quad gates. One, El Camino bound drivers driving over the rail crossing have very poor line of sight to view southbound traffic, southbound trains. This poor line of sight in conjunction with the non-quad gates being down may tempt drivers into bypassing the gates, creating a serious safety hazard, not only for the driver and the car occupants, but nearby vehicles, homes, and pedestrians. Two, Middlefield bound drivers driving over the rail crossings that are taking a left from Station Lane have a visibility unimpeded route over the tracks. This unimpeded access may tempt drivers into driving straight across the tracks, even with the gates down. This could be particularly tempting during the times when the southbound trains are stopped at the Atherton station. Like El Camino bound drivers, this is a serious safety hazard. Three, for families driving their children to Encinal Elementary, Watkins is one of the routes to Encinal. It is also the only road to Holbrook Palmer Park, which further increases the likelihood that traffic crossing Watkins has a high percentage of children. Four, quad gates will increase the likelihood that this section of Caltrain right-of-way can be made into a quiet zone, which will improve the experience of people using nearby Holbrook Palmer Park and the quality of life for nearby residents. Five, Fair Oaks Avenue already has quad gates, and it has some of the same limited line of sight issues as Watkins. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Scott, Jennifer, and Eva Lane. And he lives at 33 Walnut Avenue in Atherton. So I think the only thing I could add is we've been looking at this for 4 years, and I just think that now is the time to get it in the capital project so it doesn't get lost. And I think there's probably some funding, but we aren't aware of how much and where, but between MTC and the county, that we think we could mitigate it cost about $1 million, that we could get some funding to help that, but we're not sure how much. And Fair Oaks was done gratis, it will cost $1.5 million. So I think we should be grateful that Caltrans did that, and our paying our share would not be an unreasonable request. So thank you, I hope you include that in the capital project.
Thanks, Craig.
Mr. Mayor, just for your information,
Please.
the council can't take action on items that are introduced at the public comments portion of the meeting. You can put it in, you could vote to put it on the agenda at the next meeting, but you can't put it on here because that would have to be in front of the public before the meeting occurred, but it wasn't. Mr. Conley can present it, but the council can't take action on it.
That's fine. I think that probably the intent was just to let us know that your wishes during this study session.
Well, there will be a formal process by the rail committee to bring it to the council.
Sure. At any point in time, the council can certainly look at it and add it as a project.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And thank you, Craig, and congratulations. So let's go ahead and move on, close the public comment portion, move on to study session, the 5-year capital improvement program, city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Behind you sits Mike Kashiwagi, who's got the staff report and a PowerPoint presentation to go along with it. You have the full version of the 5-year CIP. In addition, there's a printout copy, hard copy that was given to you this evening, and there were 2 tables in there. One was a tabular table, and the other was a pie chart. Their numbers didn't correlate. That was pointed out during some of our one-on-ones. So Robert's handing out those 2 pages just to make those 2 correlate formally. There's been no changes to capital projects or anything, just making the numbers mesh. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mike, or Gordon.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of the council. We're here this afternoon in this work session, to really introduce the 5-year capital improvement program. The purpose of this workshop is really to provide an overview of the funding sources and uses, and I thank Robert Barron for his working on the figures, because clearly he has more accuracy than I do. Also to introduce potential projects, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that certainly as we go along. And then really to facilitate council discussions, so you can give us, the fourth point, give us some guidance and direction on future requests for specific proposals or bids for specific projects. What is the CIP? It's a budget and planning tool. It allows us to implement the general plan and the master plans, of which we have 3 currently kind of underway: drainage, parks, and bike ped, that have not been accepted by the council, and then the civic center one that has been accepted, all of which are in the process of being finalized and having environmental review. And mainly it allows council to direct staff in terms of implementation of projects to reflect town priorities. As I mentioned, we have a number of draft master plans. In many cases, as you'll see, specific projects are not specified, but staff is recommending that funding be earmarked in the 5-year CIP, and then specifically appropriated as part of the budget for the first year, so that following the environmental assessment and council adoption, council can give direction for what do the CIP projects do as opposed from the operating budget? Well, they help to do projects which reduce transportation deficiencies and improve safety, reduce congestion, enhance our drainage capacities, and replace obsolete or deficient facilities. And those are some of the foci of this year's projects. We try and match the needs with the available funding. We've got some grant funds for specific items, the Surface Transportation Program, ABAG Risk Management. We have a number of local, I mean both county and local tax sources for transportation. We have the dedicated funding for the Atherton Channel. We have some dedicated funding for other projects. And then we have unrestricted funds, donations, and the asterisk means that people might choose to make donations that are restricted or targeted for specific uses, mainly in the Civic Center. And then we have the general fund, which also provides funds for capital improvement. And you'll see this year, the majority, or more than almost 50% of the proposed funding is for facilities, most of that being the Civic Center, including the library. The second large area is drainage, which the large project in there is the Marsh Road Channel. And then transportation, although it's a smaller, a little less than a quarter of the pie, it's got a lot of projects, but most of them are small, or it's for beginning work of design and environmental review before we actually start construction. And then that tiny sliver at the very top are some funding we proposed to allow for implementation of some parks projects upon the adoption of the Parks Master Plan. We've grouped the projects into 4 main headings: drainage, transportation, which is really everything in the right-of-way, including traffic signals, street lighting, street trees, etc. Facilities, which are mainly buildings, and then lastly, parks. Let me pause for a moment and see if there are any questions on those general issues before we start in on some highlighted of the projects. We're not going to go over every one of the projects, but rather ones which we think there may be more questions about, or we would like to amplify slightly.
Through the chair. I just have a collection on page 6 in the revenue sources. Please measure X.
Thank you very much. Robert and I just discovered that today.
Oh, okay,
So,
all right.
and you read it 15 times and still miss
X,
one.
X, so that's it.
That marks the spot.
Yeah, thank you.
If there are no more questions at this point, let me launch right into the first of the 8 specific project areas that we'll focus on in this interaction and dialogue. This is for drainage improvements. As you're all aware, we had a work session recently where our consultant was looking at our drainage master plan. And they came up with a rough number at that point of about $20 million worth of work. And as you can see here, we're not proposing, even over 5 years, $20 million worth of projects. What we are proposing is some funding that would allow us in the earlier years, certainly next year and perhaps even the year after, to begin some of the design work on some of the projects, and then thereafter some implementation. And what I want to make sure you understood is we have no projects specifically in here, as I mentioned earlier. However, this would allow for funding once you adopt the master plan, and once we are able to go over each of the projects in that master plan, for council to say, we like projects, BB, JJ, and, XX, for example, and we'd like staff to begin the work to develop RFPs for engineering, design work, and analysis that would then come back to council. So really, you have kind of 2 more bites of the apple before we really go forward with any specific projects.
I understand what you're saying, let's use it for design, that's a great idea, because we don't know what the projects are, but there are some basic projects that, even before it rains, we know it's gonna rain tomorrow, and we put signs out on some of these streets that says caution flooding. So there should be some minor things we can do to at least ease that, and I know that, do we have any money for that, or is that just?
What I would have to say, Councilmember Woodward, is even in those areas where we put up the signs where we say flooding, the projects themselves would not be minor. They could be in the 6-7 figure range.
No, I agree with that.
So, and that, once the master plan comes before you, we can identify those that have more localized impact, and then council could give direction at that point to focus on those 2 or 3 projects. You could, we have, if you identified specific locations now, you could give us that direction now, but we think it's probably more prudent to wait till you have the entire master plan, which should be coming forward in the next 2 or 3 months, and then at that point, you'll see the whole list of projects on a map and in tabular form, and you can give that specific direction, begin design.
Well, I can understand the comment, and part of me agrees with it, but at the same time, we know where some of the major problems are, and I think that at least in some of the key spots, we should be thinking about that, not waiting for the master plan to be done, because I'm sure the master plan will identify those, but we do know there are some key spots today, right off of El Camino, where there's some minor things we can do, but anyway.
Even though some of those minor projects, though, may be able to be coordinated with a much larger solution. So we don't want to jump the gun on some of those. So I think what Gordon's trying to say is the master plan is going to identify them. And if they're low-hanging fruit, we'll put them into the CIP and move ahead. But if they're bigger projects that are coordinated with other larger projects, that we could perhaps do an assessment district or do something bigger, then that might be our
Maybe we should have 2 categories, but I'll leave it to you. But I would like to see this.
Just clarify that, so the funding for the design phase would be after we choose which project we want to move forward on, and that money would then be used for the design of that particular project. We're not, this money is not to go through any kind of design until we decide which project we want to.
Correct, and all of that would trickle back up through the council.
Okay, and I wholeheartedly agree, we cannot piecemeal this. We have been piecemealing things, bits and pieces over the years, and patching here and there. We need a comprehensive overarching plan that we can pull things together in the best way possible.
So just point of clarification, the $2.5 million that you've got in this drainage improvement program, it's not just for design, right? This is looks to me like it's a placeholder.
That's correct. You're correct. What I'm suggesting is probably in the first year, next year, and maybe even some of the year after, much of the funding would be proposed for design on a number of projects. Thereafter, depending on the size of the projects, it may be 600,000, or as we've seen with the Marsh Road Channel, it's actually more like 2.2 million. But yeah, so I believe that there's funding for some implementation in the out years. And could be money, at that point, we'd want to initiate additional design projects at the direction of council, so that we're always, about a year ahead in design, and then through the design process, we would be able to provide better figures on specific solutions, so that council could then decide to allocate either these funds for those projects, or if necessary, even to augment these funds for specific projects. I'll move on to the next one. The series streetlight replacement. This is, as many of you know, we have some very old circuits in the city. This money is to replace the wiring and most likely the conduits, because I think current technology would suggest that for those series street lighting circuits only. This does not change the light standards, the lights, or anything else about them. There are many new ideas that are emerging in terms of lighting, and adaptive technologies, but this would not change kind of the things above ground. This changes below ground, because that's where in past years we've had some safety concerns as well as reliability issues. So this also is a case where design and investigation in 14, 15, and then because of funding, 2 years out for completion of the underground construction.
Gordon, there are programs out there. Once we take a look at the full townwide streetlight system, identify how many lights, full systems to do PG&E programs to replace the light standards.
Absolutely. But at present, this funding does not anticipate either those programs or doing any of that work. But certainly, once we have the full inventory, once we have the engineering analysis, we can bring those back to council, and you may say, we'd like to broaden the scope of this project at the same time. But we were focusing solely on the safety and reliability of these systems at this time.
PG&E won't touch these lights until we fix the wire.
So, just another point of clarification here. You said that the major work is pushed out to 16, 17 based on funding availability. But when I look at the funding availability, in fact, we have the $650,000 from the special parcel tax in 15, 16. And my understanding is that the reason that we're pushing that out is just because we're going to have staff consumed with the Civic Center project and other projects, which George and I talked about in 15, 16. The comment I'd make is if we can accelerate this work from 16, 17 to 15, 16, because I believe the funding's there, we should do it so we can take advantage of those PG&E efficiency programs as soon as possible. I'd rather jump on that as quickly as we can, and I understand we need to do this first. And I'm respectful of, how tax staff will be with the Civic Center project. It's a huge project. But if there is availability to move into this with the funding there, and I think we should be clear that we're pushing it to 16, 17 because of how much staff time we need to make it happen.
So, George, wouldn't this be a prime candidate for a special assessment district?
No, these are our lines in the street. If we're talking about the replacing the lamps and doing other improvements above ground, then yeah, I think people would appreciate that. We could do an assessment district because there's certainly value connected to their property with an LED system, change out the standards, let them get involved in picking the look and feel. We're just basically doing maintenance we should have done years ago.
So is that $650,000 figure in 16, 17 just general maintenance?
That's below ground.
So that's us in.
Replacement of the below ground wiring, not really pulling out the wires.
Is this pervasive throughout the town, or is it mostly? I would agree with Vice Mayor that this is something we absolutely know we've got to do. And with staff being so overworked with all these other present things, how much more costly would it be I don't know, to hire an expert consultant specifically to manage that project? Because I know that last year, Lloyd Park residents went without lights for a long time because of this. And staff was very, very taxed in trying to deal with Steve Tyler, and they really scratched their head and worked hard to try to miraculously.
Mike and I were chatting about that earlier today, and we can always hire a consultant to do the work. Sometimes that's the easiest solution, but even that consultant needs to be managed to some degree, so there is still individual staff time involved there. But if it can be pushed up, I mean, I hear your point, it should be pushed up. There's going to be a lot going on in 14, 15, 15, 16. I don't want to not only tax the community here, but tax the community, not just staff, with other projects going on throughout town.
If, just to go back to the mayor's point, it sounds like this was work that needed to be done in the past, that we haven't done. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's a reason not to look at the possibility of a special assessment district, just because it was delayed for whatever reason. If we looked at a special assessment district, would there be any bearing to move it up? You know, and say, we're looking at a special assessment district, we've got a $650,000 price tag, but we add another, whatever, 50,000, whatever it is, for the consulting work.
I don't think that's the point. I don't think it's the money that's the point. I think it's the point that city manager was making about not having it be a special assessment district is because it doesn't add value, architectural or aesthetic value to the area. Like if you were going to put underground utility poles that enhances your property value, that particular neighborhood would want to pay for. This is infrastructure work, in a
Correct.
sense.
But it's for a specific neighborhood, and in fact, it does lay the basis to be able to make further changes, like take advantage of what PG&E offers that would improve the property value. I mean,
Which would be the benefit of an assessment district.
Well, that may have a point there. I think creating, that would delay even
maybe.
I think creating a special assessment district has its own set of timetables
Okay.
and.
You're talking
I'm not
about
advocating.
adding a year, because you have to have an engineering study
Yeah.
to spread the cost benefit to each parcel. And it used to be you just kind of spread it across the line. Now the courts are looking for, if you're putting, for instance, a light pole every 250 feet, well, some of the people get a bigger benefit than others, arguably, because it's much safer right around the cone of the light. It would take a while, the engineering study and then a spread of it and then a vote of the
It seems
people.
like a small amount of money for a special assessment district.
But wouldn't it be prudent to get the infrastructure in play before, I mean, cart before the horse, work on the infrastructure, push the infrastructure up, because you're going to have a year potential delay in doing the studies related to creating a special assessment district. So in essence, instead of seeing a special assessment district for 18-19 or 17-18, we could actually be considering a special assessment district in 16-17.
Are you thinking that it would be for light poles and the decorative stuff above ground?
Above ground.
Because
Because you can't
Those
do,
light
you can't do
poles
the
are
above,
gonna
you can't do
be
the
replaced.
above ground work without the below ground.
do we have to replace those poles right now?
Not necessarily, but would it be cheaper to?
Right.
Would it be cheaper to replace the poles? I understand they're decorative and the organizations that have these type of light poles think that they're very good and they like them. The issue is that when one goes out, then it knocks the guys behind them, kind of like a Christmas tree lights.
But
However,
that's what's gonna change.
yeah, well, they have to change the insides as well as the outsides. The question that I'm asking is that if we change, and put in a different type of lighting system, such as the rest of the town, or even go with LED lights, you know, as far as what type of bulbs, would that be cheaper than doing this?
Perhaps that's something the study would tell us once we do the assessment of the lighting district, what needs to be done below ground. We could also expand that study if need be to analyze the
You
replacement
also,
above ground.
you also are bumping up against CEQA because strangely enough, those light poles are old enough, they may be eligible as historic structures. And that would require us then to look at it as to whether or not we do need to do an EIR before we replace those poles. And that's happened in other communities where they've got older structure. I don't know how old those poles are. 1950, you probably get away with it. 1928, you probably have a problem.
But there may be a need, and maybe a way to replace the core, leave the pole in play, but
Yeah.
yet
Oh, yeah, it's
change
just,
the
it's just
circle.
wires.
Yeah.
It's just wires.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be what the residents would like to see.
Well, I think it'd be worthwhile to do the study and come up with all the options.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's probably, that's the first step, and if we can move it up, we move it up. If we expand it, we expand it.
Yeah, once we know what the options are, we could take action, we can,
Right.
yeah, things that are out in 16, 17, when we look at the capital improvement plan for next year, we could actually say, let's do it this year.
Correct.
So I just think that the point that, to echo Vice restate your point, is to make sure that the staff hears it, that it's possible to try to work this out.
Please.
The next project,
Well, this next project we're gonna be talking about in the next item. And what this is one of the first steps in, as far as moving forward to assess the feasibility of reducing the number of travel lanes on El Camino Real from 6 lanes to 4. The first step is to do an operational analysis. That's gonna be required by Caltrans. And so what this is just a project to fund that analysis. And again, I was going to go into more detail as part of the update that will be your next item.
it's a preview of coming attractions. Gateway signs is to fund probably a landscape architect, I would think, through an RFP process that would come to council. We have no specifics at this point other than gateway signs at the probably north and south entrances, northbound and southbound on El Camino Real, probably in the median. Could include landscaping, even drought tolerant landscaping, could include some uplighting. We have no predefined concept. 40,000 is probably generous enough to include the cost for the landscape architect and some additional iterations. Might include some of the funding, depending on what was chosen. If it was fairly simple, might include enough funding for implementation, but we don't know at this point, since we have no parameters on design, whether this would include the implementation or not.
I think he had his hand up there.
Yeah, I was gonna make a comment. I realize that we have a fair amount of cash right now, and we have lots of discussions there to go, and there are a lot of unknowns that we haven't decided on, as we brought up already with the drainage master plan, soon to be on the bike plan and the park plan. And to me, this is not something that I think it adds a tremendous amount of value. I realize it's a small cost item. I know that there was also added in from the pack that we got, and even that was handed out. You added in we could change some of the landscaping. I looked at the landscaping yesterday, and most of it is, if not all of it is pretty much drought tolerant. You've improved the city staff has done a tremendous job of improving visibility on there by trimming all the trees up and taking a lot of the bushes out. The only place where there are 2 spots north of Fair Oaks that have, very bushy areas, but it doesn't impede traffic coming to or fro. And those are oleanders, which are drought-resistant plants. And so, to me, I just don't I can't see, spending $40,000, and I realize we don't know whether or not it is $40,000, but to have a sign that says, welcome to Atherton, or now leaving Atherton, I realize we have one sign only on Middlefield, says the Atherton and how many people live here, and that number isn't right anymore, but I just don't see this. And some towns have it, some towns don't, I just don't see the value.
I wanted to ask about the photograph in the presentation, the green line. Is that a potential bike lane? Is that there? Is that in everybody's?
Yeah, it's on there.
Yeah, it's on the,
I think it's a picture, yeah.
the bike lane is on the one side.
Doesn't look like it's an Atherton.
Okay, is it generic or is this an app?
Probably a drop photo.
Oh, okay. Well, because I was wondering, where is this? It doesn't, but.
Photoshop.
So my comments about the landscaping in median along El Camino is that it is anything but attractive. And it could be so much better to be enhanced, to create a more beautiful boulevard in our length of El Camino Real. And I think it should be part of the overall plan of the narrowing of the El Camino Boulevard to create a slower, I'm going to say it because of the accident that we experienced this morning. People think that they are on the freeway through Atherton. And the minute they come out of Redwood City, they hit the gas and go 45, 50 miles an hour through our town. I ran into a police person from Redwood City the other day, and she says, there's still really only one stoplight in Atherton, isn't there? And I said, she says that at Marsh Road in Middlefield. And I said, well, yes. I said, but we did put another one on Middlefield at Ensel because of the school. She says, yeah, it's like, we always love to drive down El Camino going through Atherton because there's no stoplights, because we can get by fast. And people do that, and somehow we've got to create more of a beautiful, bucolic, thickly wooded, canopy over El Camino to create more of, reflect what our town really is, and to prevent people from going 45, 55, 60 miles an hour the minute they hit our stretch. So we are, at some point, we've got to stop the accidents from happening.
I agree with you. I agree with the issue with the signs in general. Obviously, the $40,000 was a big ticket. And obviously, we've got a lot of things we're considering for ECR. That will potentially change how the foliage is. And obviously, we don't want to do something and then have to redo it if we add a cut lane or so on and so forth. So I'm supportive of the fact that we need to get some signs or some concept of you're entering Atherton. I wish we had a beautiful, central island. I think that the consultants we have done, and Steve has done a great job of cutting back that foliage. And I know that we'll hear that. Mike's report, I think it's probably an ongoing thing, but I don't want to spend money on top of money that will potentially redo in a short period of time. But as far as the signs, I wouldn't want to see the price tag of $40,000, but.
That's just for the design.
Right, so. Rick?
No, this is design and installation is what it says, and on my paper is.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, I think
I think that would be
that
more.
the idea.
included in the 100K, yeah.
The idea is to put in gateway signs. I think we should hold off on this until we know what's going on with El Camino. And our focus has strongly been to change this thing down to 4 lanes for lots of reasons.
And just say 40K.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Gordon?
Thank you. Next program is bicycle and pedestrian facilities improvement program. This master plan came to you in a workshop about 2 months ago, and we are continuing to work with our consultant. The funding in here is fairly heavy in next fiscal year and then trails off, but it would allow for a variety of things. And again, this would come back to council once you approve the master plan, which would be following the environmental work and the process that goes for that. So I guess we're talking sometime in the fall before this would come back to you. But as examples, and by the way, I want to talk first about some nomenclature. We talk about Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 bike paths. Class 1 is an off-street, separate, paved, with a surface that should allow for safe riding. They're typically at least 8 feet wide, possibly up to 12 feet wide. Can be one direction or both directions. Class 2 is using the existing street, asphalt, concrete, whatever, although sometimes it requires a little bit of widening. Typically only 4 feet wide, one direction on the side of the road, with an edge stripe to separate the bike path from the vehicular traveled way.
So that's what we see here.
Yes, that Middlefield Road has Class 2, although there are stretches in Middlefield, we haven't pulled a tape out there, but there are probably some stretches that don't meet the 4-foot width, which is why the project is included in the master plan for future investigation. And finally, we have Class 3, and those are signs only. And what you see up there as an example are some of the segments that had been identified in the master plan, potentially for Class 3 wayfinding signage. Kind of the north-south route, the Austin, Berry, Elena area. This doesn't suggest that that's the project to do, or that Middlefield widening is to be done, or Alameda de las Pulgas, or any other project. But there's sufficient funding, since this master plan is kind of the furthest along of the other three. The Civic Center kind of is its separate track, but drainage, park, bike ped, this one's kind of the furthest along, so we think you'd probably have the opportunity to do some implementation of this project next year. If you pick the class, or the Class 3 for